The moment you stop begging for love, they begin to fear losing you. Yes, the very thing you thought was keeping them close may actually be pushing them away. And the moment you release this desperate energy, your specific person starts feeling pulled toward you in ways they cannot explain, because love does not respond to force. It responds to identity. There comes a moment in every manifestation journey when you finally realize something powerful. Your specific person was never resisting your desire. They were reflecting your inner state. The chasing, the overthinking, the constant checking for signs, it all comes from one hidden belief. I am not chosen yet. But the moment you stop operating from lack, everything changes. And today, you are going to discover the one thing you must stop doing if you want your SP to fall deeply, passionately, naturally in love with you. You must understand this. No one was ever meant to become the source of your worth. And the moment you make another person responsible for making you feel loved, you unknowingly abandon your own power. You begin watching them too closely. You wait for the message. You analyze the silence. You search their voice for reassurance. You look for signs that you matter. And in doing so, you silently confess to yourself, without their attention, I am incomplete. Now listen carefully, because this is where so many lose themselves. The world can only mirror the position you occupy within yourself. It cannot do otherwise. If inwardly you feel unwanted, reality must organize itself to reflect that belief. If inwardly you feel uncertain of your value, then everything outside you begins to echo uncertainty back to you. You say you want love, yet all day long, you are asking for evidence that you are worthy of it. Do you see the contradiction? The person who knows they are loved does not beg for reminders. The person who knows they are chosen does not panic over delay. The person who understands their value does not crumble because of temporary silence. And yet many spend their days emotionally chasing approval without realizing it. They call it love, but often it is fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that someone else holds the power to decide whether they are worthy, but no one has that power unless you give it to them. The moment you place another person above yourself in consciousness, you begin shrinking. You begin waiting, hoping, seeking, needing. And neediness is not love. Neediness is the belief that something outside you contains what you lack within yourself. But you were never meant to live that way. You were meant to awaken to the realization that love begins within your own assumption of self. Not tomorrow, not after they text you, not after they return. Now, for what would happen if you stopped seeking permission to feel valuable? What would happen if you walked through this world with the quiet certainty that you are already unforgettable, already desired, already deeply worthy of devotion? Something within you would change. Your thoughts would soften. Your fear would loosen. Your desperation would disappear. And suddenly your energy would no longer say, please choose me. It would say, I already know who I am. There is something profoundly attractive about a person who no longer needs to force love, because they are no longer operating from emptiness. They are no longer trying to extract validation from another human being. They have become emotionally complete within themselves. And the strange thing is, the moment this happens, people begin responding differently to you. Why? Because the outer world is always responding to your inner identity. If you constantly affirm through emotion, I need them to love me so I can feel whole, then reality continues to show longing. But when you internally claim, I am already loved, I am already enough, I am already chosen, the entire atmosphere around you changes. You stop overreacting. You stop chasing. You stop fearing loss. And calm certainty replaces emotional hunger. Now your presence feels different. Your words feel different. Even your silence feels different. Because you are no longer standing before them as someone seeking confirmation. You are standing before them as someone who already knows their worth. And people can feel that. Never underestimate the power of self-concept. Never underestimate what happens when a person finally stops abandoning themselves emotionally. For the moment you stop asking another person to define your value, you become magnetic in a way that cannot be explained logically. Not because you manipulated anyone, but because you changed the story you were telling yourself every single day. And once you begin changing that inner story, another challenge appears before you. Perhaps an even greater one, because now you must learn not to be hypnotized by appearances. You must stop allowing the outer world to dictate your emotional state. Most people say they believe in manifestation until reality becomes uncomfortable. The moment the text does not arrive, the moment the call is delayed, the moment nothing seems to move, fear returns, and suddenly they abandon the new identity they were beginning to build within themselves. They return to overthinking, watching, waiting, reacting. They stare at the outer world as though it possesses authority over their destiny. But the outer world has no authority. It is only a reflection, an echo, a delayed mirror of old assumptions once accepted as true. Yet, people continue worshipping what they see with their physical senses. They treat temporary circumstances as permanent facts. They look at silence and immediately conclude rejection. They look at distance and assume disconnection. They look at delay and imagine failure. But appearances have deceived many people. For what you see today may only be the shadow of who you used to be emotionally. The outer world is slow to change because it is responding to thoughts, fears, assumptions, and emotional identities previously entertained within consciousness. So when nothing appears to be happening, it does not mean nothing is happening. There are movements taking place beyond your awareness. Conversations, shifts, emotional impressions, invisible rearrangements. The human mind becomes impatient because it wants immediate confirmation. But creation does not begin in the visible world. It begins within, always within. And this is why emotional reactions become so dangerous. Because every time you panic over circumstances, you return life to the old state. You breathe energy back into the very fear you claim you no longer want. You affirm separation every time you obsess over evidence of separation. Can you not see it? You say, why are they distant? Why are they silent? Why haven't they returned? And in asking those questions repeatedly, you continue emotionally identifying with the version of reality where they are absent from you. But the person who truly understands inner creation does not bow before appearances. They understand something deeper. They understand that imagination precedes fact. So instead of reacting to the current moment, they remain faithful to the unseen reality they have accepted inwardly, even when the senses deny it, even when reason argues against it, even when time appears to stretch endlessly before them. For if you continue returning emotionally to the fulfilled state, the world must eventually conform. It has no choice. The problem is not that people fail to manifest. The problem is that they interrupt the process through fear. One moment they affirm love, the next moment they affirm abandonment through emotional reaction. And the outer world simply reflects whichever state is dominant. This is why calmness is power. A calm person is dangerous to old circumstances because they are no longer easily shaken by appearances. They no longer need constant reassurance from the visible world. They no longer demand immediate proof that something is changing. They already know it is changing, within themselves first. And because they know this inwardly, they stop chasing movement in the outer world. They stop searching social media for hidden meanings. They stop interpreting every small event as success or failure. They stop exhausting themselves emotionally over temporary shadows. Instead, they remain inwardly loyal to the reality they desire. And slowly, almost mysteriously, the outer world begins reorganizing itself around that inner conviction. People suddenly think about them again. Messages arrive unexpectedly. Distance begins dissolving. Emotions soften, not because force was applied, but because consciousness changed first. You must remember this whenever fear tries to return. The visible world is not the creator. It is the created. And if you continue surrendering your emotional power to appearances, you will forever remain trapped reacting to effects instead of transforming causes. The person who masters this becomes free from panic, free from desperation, free from emotional slavery to circumstances. And from that state of inner stability, love begins moving toward them naturally, quietly, almost effortlessly. But even after a person begins mastering their reactions to the outer world, there still remains one final chain tying them to the old reality. And that chain is identity, the identity they continue carrying from past pain. For many people say they desire a new relationship while inwardly remaining loyal to the memory of rejection. They have memorized every painful moment, every unanswered message, every disappointment, every moment they felt abandoned, ignored, replaced, or unloved. And though they may no longer speak of it constantly, emotionally, they continue living inside it. You must understand something very profound. The world does not respond to what happened to you yesterday. It responds to who you believe yourself to be now. And if deep within yourself you still identify as the person who was rejected, then no matter how much affirming you do, your inner state continues reproducing the same emotional experience in different forms. Because consciousness is faithful to identity, not temporary words, not forced techniques. Identity, that is why some people repeat affirmations all day long, yet still feel anxious, insecure, and afraid. Because beneath the words, they are still emotionally occupied by the old version of themselves, the wounded version, the abandoned version, the version that expects disappointment. And what you expect emotionally, you unconsciously invite. This is why you must stop introducing yourself internally as the person who was hurt. You cannot continue saying, "They left me, they broke me, they never chose me," and then expect to step naturally into the reality of being deeply loved. For every time you repeat the old story with emotional conviction, you revive it. You keep it alive within consciousness. You continue feeding life to an identity that should have already been released. Many people do not realize this. They believe they are remembering the past, but in truth, they are recreating it emotionally in the present moment. And whatever is emotionally alive within you will continue seeking expression through your outer world. So the question is not merely, what do you want? The real question is, who are you being? Are you being the person who fears abandonment? The person who expects inconsistency? The person secretly preparing for heartbreak before love even arrives? Or are you becoming someone entirely new? Because this work requires transformation of self. Not surface level positivity, not pretending, transformation. You must become internally unfamiliar with the old version of yourself. The old self reacted with fear. The new self remains secure. The old self searched for signs of rejection. The new self expects devotion naturally. The old self replayed painful memories endlessly. The new self refuses to emotionally live in a graveyard of former experiences. You see, many wish to carry their old identity into a new reality. But consciousness does not work that way. You cannot continue embodying abandonment while expecting fulfillment. The old state must die. And perhaps this is what frightens people most. Because the familiar identity, even when painful, feels comfortable. It becomes a psychological home. Some have identified with rejection for so long that they no longer know who they are without it. But you must be willing to release it completely. Not someday. Now, you must stop calling yourself unlucky in love. Stop assuming people always leave. Stop defining yourself by what another human being failed to recognize in you. During a former state of consciousness, That was not your permanent identity. It was only a state you occupied. And states can change the moment you stop emotionally introducing yourself as the rejected version of you. Something extraordinary begins happening within your mind. You no longer interpret everything through fear. You no longer expect loss around every corner. You no longer panic when temporary silence appears, because inwardly you are no longer the same person. Now you begin thinking differently, feeling differently, reacting differently. And because your identity changes, the mirror of life must eventually change as well. For no one can consistently experience love while continuously identifying as someone unworthy of receiving it. The person who is deeply loved in this world is first deeply convinced of it within themselves. And once that conviction becomes natural, reality begins reflecting it in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. And as your identity begins changing, another temptation will appear before you. The temptation to interfere, to force, to control every movement between yourself and the person you desire. This is where many people unknowingly delay their own manifestation, because after they begin feeling hopeful, they immediately become impatient. They start asking themselves, when will it happen? How will they come back? What should I do to make them move faster? And little by little, they leave the state of trust and return to the state of effort. But listen carefully, because this is important. The moment you begin trying to control the unfolding of your desire, you reveal that you do not fully believe it is already yours. For the person who truly knows something belongs to them is not consumed with forcing outcomes every moment of the day. They rest inwardly. But the anxious mind cannot rest. It wants to supervise reality constantly. It wants to manage every detail. It wants to determine the exact path love should take. And because of this, many become exhausted emotionally. They affirm in the morning, panic by afternoon, and search for movement all night long. Yet creation was never meant to feel like struggle. You were never asked to manipulate the middle. You were only asked to remain faithful to the end. Do you understand? The mind obsessed with controlling how is still deeply attached to fear. Fear that if it does not interfere, nothing will happen. Fear that the desire is fragile. Fear that love can disappear unless constantly managed. But reality does not respond to force the way people imagine it does. Force creates resistance. Fear creates delay. Control creates tension. And tension pulls you away from the very state you are attempting to embody. You must begin trusting the unseen movements of life. For there are bridges of events taking place beyond your awareness every single day. People are thinking thoughts they have not spoken aloud. Hearts are softening in silence. Circumstances are rearranging themselves naturally. Conversations are unfolding that you know nothing about. But because human beings cannot see these invisible movements, they assume nothing is happening. And so they interfere. They send a desperate message. They over-explain themselves. They chase reassurance. They attempt to force timing, not realizing that impatience itself is often the confession. I do not truly believe it is mine yet. But the person living from fulfillment behaves differently internally. They are not consumed with controlling every detail because they understand something deeper. They understand that once the seed is planted in consciousness, life itself begins carrying the desire toward fulfillment. Just as a seed beneath the earth does not require you to dig it up every hour, your manifestation does not require constant interference. Imagine planting a flower and then becoming so afraid it would not grow that you began pulling at it every day to make it bloom faster. You would destroy the very thing you were trying to help. And many people do this emotionally with love. They interrupt natural unfolding through fear-driven action. They refuse to allow reality space to organize itself because they are addicted to immediate certainty. But faith is not frantic. Faith is calm. Faith understands that the unseen can still be real. And this inner calmness changes your entire energy. You stop trying to calculate every possibility. You stop wondering who they are speaking to. You stop obsessing over timing. You stop trying to force signs from the universe every few hours. Instead, you begin living, breathing, trusting, remaining inwardly loyal to your desired reality. And strangely enough, when you finally stop gripping so tightly, movement begins. Because desperation no longer clouds your consciousness. Now your mind is open. Your energy is relaxed. Your heart is no longer vibrating with fear. And from this state, love can flow naturally toward you. Not through manipulation, not through pressure, not through emotional force, but through the quiet law of assumption unfolding itself in ways your rational mind could never have predicted. For the deeper intelligence of life does not need your constant supervision. It only requires your inner agreement. Your willingness to remain faithful to the reality you have accepted within yourself, even when you cannot yet see every step unfolding before your eyes. And when a person finally begins trusting the unfolding of life, instead of trying to control it, another transformation must take place within them. A very deep one. Perhaps one of the most important of all. They must stop placing another human being on a pedestal. Because the moment you place someone above yourself in your mind, you unconsciously separate yourself from the very love you desire. You begin seeing them as greater than you, more valuable than you, more important than you. And from that moment forward, fear quietly enters the relationship. Fear of losing them. Fear of not being enough for them. Fear that they hold something you do not possess within yourself. But no person was ever meant to occupy the throne of your self-worth. The moment you worship another human being emotionally, you forget your own divine value. You begin looking at them as though they are the source of happiness, love, fulfillment, and security. And because you believe they possess what you lack, attachment becomes painful. Can you see why so many suffer in love? They do not truly desire partnership. They desire emotional completion. They believe, if this person chooses me, then I will finally feel whole. If they love me, then I will finally feel worthy. And so they unconsciously hand over their emotional power. They become hypersensitive to every shift in behavior. Every delayed message feels threatening. Every moment of distance feels terrifying. Because inwardly, they have convinced themselves that this person determines their value. But another human being cannot carry that burden for you. No one can permanently give you the worth you refuse to claim within yourself. This is why some people become obsessed with one person. Not because the connection is necessarily extraordinary, but because psychologically they have elevated that person into a symbol of validation, into a symbol of completion. And the higher the pedestal becomes, the smaller they begin feeling within themselves. Notice what happens when someone feels inferior in love. They overanalyze everything. They become afraid to speak honestly. They fear being replaced constantly. They tolerate treatment that wounds them emotionally because they secretly believe losing the person would mean losing part of themselves. But love was never meant to feel like emotional servitude. True love does not ask you to abandon yourself. The person who understands their worth does not need to chase desperately. They do not need to perform endlessly for affection. They do not live in constant terror of being abandoned because inwardly they already feel complete. And completeness is magnetic. There is something deeply attractive about a person who does not idolize others. A person who can love deeply without shrinking themselves. A person who admires without worshiping. A person who remains emotionally grounded even while desiring connection. Because that person radiates inner stability. And stability creates attraction far more powerfully than desperation ever could. You must begin seeing yourself differently, not arrogantly. Not with pride, but with inner recognition. You must understand that you are not begging life for scraps of affection. You are not competing for love. You are not standing beneath another human being hoping to be selected like someone unworthy. No. You are the operant power within your reality. And the moment you truly accept this inwardly, relationships begin changing naturally. For people respond to the identity you occupy. If you see yourself as less valuable, others unconsciously mirror that assumption. But when you carry yourself with quiet certainty, when you internally know you are worthy of devotion, respect, affection, and consistency, people feel it without words. Your energy changes, your standards change. your reactions change. And strangely enough, the very people you once feared losing begin leaning toward you differently. Not because you controlled them, but because you stopped diminishing yourself before them. Never place another person at the center of your emotional universe. For the moment you do, fear begins ruling your mind. And fear always distorts love into attachment, anxiety, and suffering. Instead, place yourself back upon the throne of your own consciousness. Become the source of the love you seek. Become the approval you were chasing. Become the security you thought another person needed to provide. And when you finally stop looking at someone as though they are above you, you will discover something remarkable. You no longer fear love, because you no longer fear losing yourself within it. And once you stop placing another person above yourself, another habit must disappear from your consciousness completely. A habit that quietly keeps people trapped in doubt, even while they claim to believe. They keep searching for signs. Constantly. They wake up looking for evidence. They spend the day searching for confirmation. They analyze every small coincidence, hoping it means something is finally happening. And though they may not realize it, this endless checking often comes from the same old fear they were trying to escape. The fear that perhaps nothing is changing at all. So they look outside themselves repeatedly for reassurance. They ask, did I manifest this sign? Does this mean they are thinking about me? Why haven't I seen movement yet? Is the universe showing me something? But listen carefully, because this is important. The person who truly knows their desire is already unfolding, does not live in constant need of proof. Why? Because certainty is quiet. It does not panic every hour searching for evidence that it is loved. You must understand the difference between faith and emotional dependency upon signs. One comes from inner knowing, the other comes from hidden doubt. And doubt has a way of exhausting the mind. People begin checking their phones compulsively, watching social media obsessively, interpreting songs, numbers, dreams, and random events all day long. And the deeper problem is not the signs themselves. The deeper problem is the state of mind behind the searching. For what is the mind truly saying every time it desperately seeks reassurance? It is saying, I am afraid it may not happen. And that fear keeps pulling consciousness back into waiting, back into uncertainty, back into emotional lack. Can you see how subtle this becomes? A person may affirm love all morning, yet spend the entire afternoon desperately checking for proof that the affirmation worked. And in doing so, they unknowingly confess that they do not yet feel secure within themselves. But reality does not transform because you force yourself to see signs everywhere. Reality transforms when your inner state changes so deeply that you no longer need constant external confirmation. Think of a person who knows beyond doubt that they are loved. Would they spend every moment anxiously searching for evidence? Would they panic because 1 hour passed without movement? Would they analyze every silence as danger? No. Because inwardly they already feel secure. This is why emotional stability matters so much in manifestation. Not because you must become emotionless, but because you must stop allowing fear to dominate your awareness every few moments. Many people plant the seed of desire beautifully and then dig it up through anxious observation. Imagine a farmer planting seeds into the earth and returning every hour to uncover the soil, asking, has it grown yet? Where is the evidence? Why can't I see movement? The constant interference would prevent natural growth. And emotionally, many people are doing the same thing. They interrupt the unfolding through impatience. But creation is not always visible immediately. Much of life moves in silence before it appears physically. Roots form beneath the surface long before the flower becomes visible to the eye. And so must your faith deepen beyond appearances. You must learn to remain inwardly loyal to your desired reality even when external confirmation is absent. Even when nothing seems to be changing. Even when the senses grow impatient. Because the unseen does not mean the unreal. There are thoughts being impressed upon the subconscious mind continuously. Emotional states are shifting beneath the surface of reality. Bridges of events are forming quietly without your awareness. And often, at the very moment people stop obsessively searching for signs, manifestations begin arriving naturally. Why? Because they finally relax. They finally stop choking the desire with fear. Now their energy becomes lighter, more open, more trusting. And from this calmer state, they begin living again instead of emotionally monitoring reality every second. That is when love begins approaching without force. That is when messages arrive unexpectedly. That is when circumstances soften naturally. That is when people feel drawn back without explanation. Not because science created the manifestation, but because inner conviction becomes stronger than outer uncertainty. For the person who truly trusts, the unseen no longer needs the world to reassure that every moment that creation is working. They already know it is. And when a person finally reaches this state, when they stop chasing validation, stop reacting to appearances, stop identifying with rejection, stop forcing outcomes, stop worshiping another person, and stop desperately searching for signs, something remarkable begins happening within them. They begin becoming someone new. Not pretending, not acting, becoming. For manifestation was never truly about changing another person. It was always about transforming the self who believed they were unloved. And this is the great secret so many overlook. You do not wait for love in order to feel loved. You feel love first. You become inwardly familiar with the version of yourself who is already adored, already prioritized, already deeply chosen. And from that inner state, reality begins rearranging itself naturally. Most people move through life backwards emotionally. They say, when they return, I will finally feel secure. When they commit, I will finally feel worthy. When they choose me, I will finally relax. But that way of living keeps love forever outside of you, because you continue assigning your emotional fulfillment to future circumstances. Yet the outer world can only mirror the consciousness you occupy now. So if you continue embodying loneliness while waiting for love, loneliness continues reflecting itself back to you. But when you begin living internally as the person who is already cherished, the mirror of life begins changing to match that identity. This is why your inner conversations matter so deeply. What do you say about yourself when no one is watching? How do you imagine yourself in relationships? What emotional atmosphere do you carry throughout the day? For the person who feels chosen inwardly walks differently through this world. There is no desperation in them, no constant fear, no exhausting need to control everything. Instead, there is quiet confidence, not loud arrogance, not performance. Peace. The peace of someone who no longer questions their value every hour of the day. And this inner peace changes everything. It changes the way you interpret silence, the way you respond to uncertainty, the way you carry yourself around others. Because now you are no longer emotionally living as someone trying to get love. You are living as someone who naturally experiences it. Can you feel the difference? One state says, I hope they choose me. The other says, love belongs to me naturally. One state fears abandonment constantly. The other understands that no person can permanently withhold what is already accepted within consciousness. And when this shift truly happens inside you, your entire reality begins responding differently. People feel your energy before you even speak. Because the human being who feels whole within themselves radiates something undeniable. There is ease in them, calmness in them, emotional stability in them. And these qualities are deeply attractive because they reflect inner certainty rather than emotional lack. You stop forcing conversations. Stop trying to impress. Stop anxiously monitoring every interaction. And strangely enough, this is often when the love you desired begins moving toward you most powerfully. Because you are no longer embodying need. You are embodying fulfillment. Now, when you think of your specific person, fear no longer dominates your imagination. Instead of wondering whether they love you, you naturally begin assuming they do. Instead of expecting distance, you expect closeness. Instead of preparing for disappointment, you become available for devotion. And life responds accordingly. For the outer world cannot permanently contradict the identity you persistently occupy within yourself. If you persist in being the version of you who is deeply loved, reality must eventually reflect it. Not sometimes, not accidentally. Inevitably, because consciousness always externalizes itself. And this is why your greatest task is not chasing another person. It is remaining loyal to the version of yourself who already possesses the love you seek. The version of you who sleeps peacefully, who feels secure naturally, who no longer begs for reassurance, who no longer fears being forgotten, who no longer sees themselves as abandoned or unworthy. That version of you already exists within consciousness now. And the moment you begin living from that state consistently, the world begins moving to meet you there. Love starts feeling effortless instead of painful. Connection starts feeling natural instead of forced. And the very relationship you once feared losing begins reflecting the certainty you finally created within yourself. So stop chasing. Stop doubting. Stop worshiping appearances. Your specific person is not responding to your desperation. They are responding to your self-concept. The moment you stop seeking love outside yourself, you become the person who effortlessly attracts it. And perhaps tonight, for the very first time, you finally understand you were never trying to get them to love you. You were learning how to remember your own worth first. And once that happens, love has no choice but to find you.